The dawn was still except for the steady buzz of cicadas and the rough hum of an old country song playing from a weathered radio inside the tool shed. I was near the eastern field, wrestling with a coil of wire to fix a broken fence when a cloud of dust caught my attention along the dirt lane. It wasn't the kind of dust our rusty pickup kicked up. This was purposeful, controlled. Old Joe, leaning against the fence post with a cigarette hanging from his lips, squinted toward the rising sun. "That's not one of ours," he muttered, flicking ash onto the cracked ground. We watched as a shiny silver pickup truck rolled past the private property sign and came to a stop right in the middle of our barnyard, where Joe's old sheepdog usually lay in the shade. The truck had a cheap magnetic sign slapped on the door that read Cedar Ridge Security in bold letters. No official badges, no decals, just a loud claim. Two men got out. The first looked young and uneasy, like someone who didn't want to be there. The second, wearing dark sunglasses and gripping a clipboard like it was a prize, walked confidently, acting like he owned the whole valley. They ignored the signs and the locked gate. They opened it without care and parked between the grain bins and the hay stacks, not even glancing at the animals nearby. Joe didn't shout or curse. He just took a long drag from his cigarette, muttered, "Here we go again," and dusted off his hands on his worn jeans. I could tell this was going to be one of those moments where Joe didn't need help, but I stayed close anyway. "Can I help you folks?" Joe asked, his voice steady but hard. The man with the clipboard, who introduced himself as Daniels, puffed up proudly. "We're with the Cedar Ridge Security Oversight Team," he said, enunciating every syllable like a speech. "We received reports about unauthorized equipment stored too close to the property line. We're here for a routine inspection." Joe just turned, took a few steps toward the barn, and then pointed flatly at the rusty trailer parked by the fence. "You've got 30 seconds to move that truck, or I'm dragging it down to the creek." Daniels laughed, thinking Joe was joking. The younger man nervously chuckled too, clearly unsure what to expect. But Joe was already climbing into his old diesel tow truck. The engine roared louder than I'd heard in years. I thought he might bluff. We'd dealt with city folk before, those office types throwing out fancy words, but never daring to cross the boundary line. But these two had parked in our working yard, speaking nonsense about regulations that didn't apply to us. There wasn't a security outfit for miles around, and even if there was, they had zero authority here. Joe hooked a heavy chain to the silver truck's rear axle with the precision of a man who had done this kind of work his whole life. Daniel started waving his arms, yelling about lawsuits and illegal towing. The younger guy ran after the truck, shouting, but Joe didn't slow down. Tires spun, kicking up dirt and grass as he hauled the shiny truck out of the yard, across the gravel path, and down the muddy slope to the creek below. The recent rain made the ground slick, perfect for humbling someone who thought they were above the land. Joe stopped the truck just long enough to get a good pull, then released the chain with a loud clink. The silver truck, in neutral, slid forward, nose first, into the shallow creek. Water splashed and mud flew. The magnetic Cedar Ridge Security decal started peeling off like it was a shame to be seen. Daniel stood frozen, soaked and furious. Joe stepped out of the tow truck like he'd just finished a normal chore. "Tow it out yourself," he said. "Next time, bring a badge." I was laughing so hard I could barely stand. The young man scrambled for his phone to record what was happening, but Joe was quicker. He snapped a picture of the half-submerged truck and called the county sheriff. "Got some trespassers claiming to be security," Joe said. "Come check their paperwork before I toss the clipboard in the creek." 15 minutes later, Deputy Mason showed up. He turned off his lights, rolled down the window, and grinned when he saw the wet truck. "Didn't read the signs, huh?" Mason said, looking at Joe. "Not much reads around here," Joe replied, tossing the deputy a towel. Mason walked over to Daniels, who looked like he had just been caught in a storm. His confidence had washed away with the creek water. "ID," Mason said firmly. Daniels fumbled out a laminated card that looked homemade. Mason barely glanced at it and scoffed. "This says you're a compliance officer for Cedar Ridge Security," he said skeptically. Daniels mumbled the full name, Cedar Ridge Property Oversight Division. Mason folded the card into his notebook. "Funny, no such agency exists in this county. And even if it did, You don't have permission to park or inspect private land. Daniels tried to throw around terms like jurisdiction and boundary assessments, but they didn't land. Joe popped open the truck's back door, revealing a clipboard, folders, and a walkie-talkie. Mason flipped through the papers and pulled out a hand-drawn map. Our farm was circled in red ink, with notes on water access and non-compliant zones. A jagged line led from our creek to a shaded area marked for development. "This isn't compliance," Mason muttered. "It's a scheme." He radioed for backup and a zoning officer, narrowing his eyes at Daniels. The young man finally spoke up. "I just rode along. My uncle said it was a property survey job. I didn't know it was illegal." "Who's your uncle?" Mason asked. "Jake Brandt," the kid answered quickly. Joe's jaw tightened. Brandt was the slick developer known for pushing subdivisions around town and calling local farmers obstacles during heated council meetings. The pieces fit together. Mason called in a tow crew and turned back to Daniels. "You're coming with me." Daniels tried to argue he was only a middleman, but Joe cut him off. "Lucky I didn't have the excavator hooked up," Joe said, tossing the clipboard into the grass. The tow truck arrived, and Mason explained this was more than trespassing. Similar scams have been reported in nearby counties, involving fake badges and forged documents. We hadn't just caught trespassers. We'd caught the front line of a land grab. Daniels was led away, head down. The younger man stayed behind, muttering about thinking it was just a summer gig. Joe set a soda on the fence post nearby and walked off without a word. That night, we set up a trail camera by the creek, expecting more trouble. At dawn, it caught two men, one with a measuring wheel, the other with a GPS device, marking the creek bend. They wore vests matching the survey stakes we'd found illegally planted along the tree line. We showed the footage to Mason, who printed it out and called a state investigator. The investigator shared photos of other farms hit by the same scam. Bulldozers, pipelines, and Brandt Company logo on equipment. "They're testing boundaries," he said, "looking for weak spots." Joe's answer was simple. They picked the wrong farm. The next day, Brandt showed up himself by the creek, silver-haired and smug, with two cronies. He spread a map across his truck hood, pointing like he was slicing up our land. Joe approached calmly. "Morning, Jake," Joe said. Brandt grinned. "Didn't expect you out this early." Joe's eyes never left the creek. "Didn't expect you on my land." Brandt waved it off, talking about field surveys and increased property value. Joe stepped closer. "You sent fake security guys, planted stakes without permits, and now you think a smile fixes that?" Brandt's grin faded. "Be reasonable, Joe. There's money in this. A 20-foot easement, top dollar." Joe's stare hardened. "I'll notice every time your trucks park where my kids fish, every pipe that floods my fields, every time you carve up my land without a knock." Brandt's tone turned cold. "You'll regret this, Joe. Progress always wins. You just need a trip first." I started filming. Brandt saw my phone and stormed off with his cronies. That day, we built a new fence, barbed wire, solar lights, and cameras with signs that warned. Trespassers will be photographed and confronted. A county official later confirmed Brandt's utility corridor claim was fake. No permits, no surveys. His office was raided, revealing forged papers and illegal plans. The state froze his permits, and his company collapsed under fraud charges. Brandt vanished, leaving angry landowners in his wake. Weeks later, a package arrived, a drone photo of the creek, our fence shining, and the silver truck still rusting in the mud. A red marker on the photo read, "Message received." Joe leaned the photo against a barn wall, a quiet trophy. The creek ran clear again, and the fence stood strong, a clear line of respect carved into the land and memory. They came for the water, but Joe made sure they drowned in their own game.